In this episode, I'm going to talk about how to increase the sense of urgency in your world as your storylines unfold. And to do this, we're always going to remember that your player characters are inspiring the events. They're causing the NPCs to react as they are. And we're also going to have your NPCs want to achieve their goals sooner rather than later, because they want things to happen quickly. They want to beat your player characters to the punch. And your player characters are what they call the butterfly effect, in which the butterfly beating its wings far in the Amazon causes thunderstorms thousands of miles away. The player characters inspire events even when they don't realize the connections and the webs of influences that they have. The classic example is your player characters burst down a door on the first level dungeon. They look in the room, it's empty, and they move on. But the sound of that door being smashed, it resonates and echoes down corridors, through rooms, down chutes, into caverns, and finally it ends in a great cavern. And as it dies away, a reptilian eye opens. An eye that has been closed for 1,000 years. And that creature wonders, who is in my dungeon? Hello again, I'm KR King, and this is my YouTube channel dedicated to homebrewing a Dungeons & Dragons campaign. One of the most exciting moments in D&D as a player is when you realize that your actions mean something in the world that your GM has created. Because it's not like a module in which you can do this or you can do that, but the storyline is pretty well developed. A lot of the outcomes are determined. In a true homebrewed world, everything you do makes a difference. You're the driving force. You're the protagonist, the antagonist. You're the one that's making things happen in this world. And you realize not only that you're influencing the world, but that the NPCs are active in doing what they want to do even without you there. Once you've activated them, once you've done something and NPCs have looked at it and said, they begin to react. And they react in a way with verisimilitude, like people would act, but also the suspension of belief that you are the center of the story. But of course you are. You want to be. We're playing a game. We're trying to have fun. Now, before I start with this, I'd like to say please subscribe to my channel. I'm always looking for new subscribers. If you like what you see, if you want content on how to homebrew a campaign, how to create interesting encounters, monsters, cities, how to run battles, all the different things you need as a GM, I'm covering them in this series, so please subscribe. So as I mentioned, the NPCs in your world are going to react with purpose. They have goals, they have objectives that they're trying to do regardless of the players. But once the player characters become involved, these goals and these purposes are activated. It might be something as simple as the players come in and discover a dungeon, but before they can clean it out, they have to return home to heal up, or they have to come back to get some item, and the NPCs realizing this rush to get the dungeon and to clear it out themselves. Or it can be as big as the NPCs decide, we better sack this city now before the player characters can organize a resistance. And I talked about in an earlier episode how always to think of your players in terms of story structure, not just the protagonist, but the initiating incident for every story. They come into a situation and they cause storylines to come out. And I always think of this in terms of creating those first few storylines. In the example I gave, they went as caravan guards, and it initiated a series of actions that thrust them into this struggle between family dynasties and Zodi, the tavern keeper, trying to just keep his business alive. There are other examples that I often use. For instance, after the players have done a few adventures, a few runs, let's say they're third level, they'll be in Zodi's tavern between adventures, and a rogue will come in. And she's probably known as, she's a little bit disreputable even as rogues go. But she's friends with Zodi, she's done some work for him or whatever, and she has a story to tell. She also did the caravan guard routine, and while they were going through the Barrens, the wild area that I described between Dramos and Maneth, they had an encounter with some goblins. They defeated the goblins, and she chased one off into the wilderness. And when she killed this goblin, she found the tip, just the tip, what looks like a buried obelisk. And she finds this, and she decides, I'm not so sure I want to tell the people that are running the caravan those adventures. I don't know if I trust them. I'm not sure. I've made this discovery. I'm the only one that knows about this. So she comes back and she hears through Zodi, hey, this party, these are guys, people that you can trust or that will keep a secret. Again, they're the player characters, so they have an advantage over anyone else in the world because they're real people. So she tells them this story. And she says, I want to organize an expedition to go out to the Barrens and look at this obelisk, dig it out. What could be there? I noticed little bits of runes or something on the obelisk. Again, I just kind of dug out with my hands. We'll need to have shovels and picks to get this out. You know, there's other elements to this. The rogue may have people that know about her discovery. Somebody that was on the expedition was suspicious. They might have followed her. They've heard about this. Maybe she's asked someone else about this or given some information. And there may be another group that's interested in this very thing. They might have followed the rogue to the tavern. They're spying on the players. They're watching them. And do the players realize this? Do they investigate? Who are these people? And again, storyline on storyline, there's a race now to get to the obelisk to find out what it is. Maybe there's a confrontation at the obelisk itself before the player characters can uncover it. Now, the other thing is with a sandbox campaign, your players may just ignore the rogue. They may decide, well, she's a little shady. They check things out. And at that point, does she take this news to someone else? Does she organize another party? Do the players hear later, hey, this party of NPCs found this great treasure at the obelisk? Or do they find out this party went out to search for something in the Barrens and they were all killed? Or the classic, there was one survivor who returned. They may realize, even though they didn't take it up on it, that someone was following them. They may investigate that, do a little town adventure where they find out about some person that's looking into this, and they realize, this is a little more serious than we thought. And it creates urgency because now they know people are actively pursuing this. One, just for the matter of getting treasure. I want the treasure because I'm the player character and I'm in a race with someone else. But also in terms of the information, in terms of the storylines that are going on, there's an urgency here to find this out before people do that perhaps don't have the best interest at heart. So what do the players do? First of all, if they believe her and they decide this is a good opportunity, they'll go there with her. If they discover there is the obelisk, been buried just up to the tip, but obviously it goes down deeper, they have to dig it out. So while they're digging this out, do they get encounters? They're in this barrens, this wild area. When they dig it out, what do they find? It's covered in runes. Can they understand them? Does someone have a comprehend language? Is it something they're going to have to copy down and take somewhere else, which will, initiate an incident where someone else knows about it? Is there some secret compartment on this obelisk with some treasure? Or something else? Does it release something? Is there a dungeon underneath this obelisk? Is there a new thing to explore? A cavern, a tomb, something that no one would have known about except that the player characters initiated this. Is the obelisk itself a warning to others? And the players find this out. They go and have it deciphered or whatever and realize, this is something that shouldn't have been opened or needs to be closed before a certain time. And a lot of what these are bring in a trope that always increases the urgency in your campaign, the ticking clock. The ticking clock is a countdown by which either some event's going to happen or some state of affairs or time is going to run out. It might be a race with other NPCs or monsters against each other to discover something. The ticking clock is always great because it enforces this urgency. You better act now or, forever regret your decisions, right? One of the things you can have is a ticking clock as a certain date is very critical. To open up a tomb, you must be under a full moon to see the doorway, sort of the Mines of Moria, remember in Lord of the Rings. And then if you get to them before this event, you got to wait around, inviting random monsters or guardians like the creature in the lake in Lord of the Rings. There might be someone who's been kidnapped and they're going to be sacrificed by some evil cultists. At a certain date, at a certain time when the moon is full or the planets are all aligned or whatever. And the player characters realize this and they've got to rescue this person before this time period. Once they have done it, if they do rescue them, now the cultists are the butterfly effect, right? They're going, what the hell? These guys just upset our situation. Now we have to wait X amount of time, or perhaps there's some other ritual that can be enacted against those who have opposed the god, i.e. the player characters, right? So you have this urgency, we've got to go rescue this, we've got to do this, and then you have the butterfly effect where the cultists or whoever are now opposed to your players. And of course, you have a meta ticking clock often where the big evil person of your campaign has to do this and they have to get that item and this, and the players, as they go up in level, they get 5th, 6th, 7th level, they start to see more and more of this meta story about what has to be done against the big evil person. And that urgency, we're not just kind of wandering the world, it's a sandbox, we're just looking at this, we're looking at that, we're getting some treasure. No, they begin to uncover this secret story. And I'm going to have the race to this elder civilization in my Melanor campaign where people are going to begin to discover things. They're going to discover, what is this and what is that? What is this ancient civilization? And if there is some great power source, something left behind that both good and bad NPCs want, this creates a ticking clock for your campaign as a whole. Now, another great thing to create a sense of urgency in your campaign is to have the attitudes of your NPCs interact with the players. So let's say you have an obsessed person, a person who is obsessed with collecting some item, or they may be obsessed with a person, i.e. one of your player characters. Think in Wrath of Khan in Star Trek, where Khan was obsessed with getting back at Captain Kirk for, marooning him on the planet. And in fact, that obsession led him to do reckless things. It probably led to his demise. But he was obsessed, and we know it. Captain Ahab and Moby Dick is the literary example. Obsessed characters force your player characters into action because they will stop at nothing. They will let nothing get in their way, the player characters included. So again, they go over this in the books a little bit, creating nemeses for your player characters and their party. But what's even more interesting is when they create them through their actions. The cultists that I just talked about, if the player characters thwart their sacrifice, they are now their nemeses. They're very interested, obsessed even, with getting back at the player characters. Or they are obsessed with, getting their ritual done, that they will make more risks, they will do more things in opposition to your player characters. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. But in D&D, vengeance is a critical part of creating a sense of urgency. When you've thwarted someone, they want vengeance. Vengeance is often described as a dish best served cold, right? So they don't necessarily right away seek their vengeance. They plot it out. Now, if it's a hothead, whether the cultist types or someone who's very much a prisoner of their emotions, they may seek vengeance right away. But if you have a cold, calculating, sort of methodical person who decides, these PCs have ruined my plans, they may do it more slowly. In fact, they may set out to destroy the player characters in such a way that they cannot recover, whether it's, again, we've talked about spreading rumors about them or killing people and leaving evidence that it's them, this kind of revenge. And the player characters begin to realize what's happening, and they have to confront this person. Now, another thing to create a sense of urgency is, in terms of the players' backgrounds, but in terms of the cities, when you have conflicts between like feuds and vendettas and things like this, and the player characters become involved in these. And they recognize that if they've stepped over the line, someone is going to have to pay someone back. That's how feuds work. Even an urchin player, a player that doesn't have any family background, during their days as an urchin, they may have been in a street gang and they have feuds with these street gangs, or these characters grow up to be leading rogues. Again, the nemesis concept here. But these kind of things, because they're personal, because this person wants to get their revenge or wants to prove themselves in the constructs of this feud, it can create energy, dynamism, and a sense of urgency in your storylines that appear. So hopefully these have been helpful to you. Use these characteristics of the NPCs, use these storytelling techniques like the ticking clock to create that urgency. And again, you don't have to do it all the time. Sometimes your player characters, they just want to go out and kill monsters. They want to take a break from those things. So remember, you don't always have to have some thing that they must achieve now and must achieve now. Once they finish a storyline or an arc that did have a ticking clock or an enemy that had to be thwarted, you might have a little downtime, and just in terms of role play or going out and venturing and just discovering an old tomb and cleaning it out. That doesn't have anything to do with anything, because too much of anything is too much, right? Moderation in all things. But when you want to spice things up, when you want to have the most fun that you can have D&D, that sense of urgency in your storylines, that sense the players, we're running out of time, we've got to do this, we've got to do that, and then it all comes to a head because the NPCs have that sense of urgency as well. Sooner is better than later in terms of their objectives. You're going to have some great runs. Okay, thanks again for watching. Please comment and please subscribe. And in the meantime, keep playing D&D and tell somebody else about it.